And we are live back. What's up, everybody? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today, our special guest is DH. He's the founder of Finhaven. DH, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks, Sunny. Thank you for your invitation to this interview. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, nothing to complain about. Friday.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sunny in Vancouver.
And it's sunny in Vancouver. So,
Yeah.
actually, you were going to say something. I guess do you want to kick it off with that? You were actually first maybe share it with everyone, a paragraph on Finhaven, and then maybe we can segue into your grandmother topic.
Oh, okay. So I'm the CEO of Finhaven. We started back in 2017. We saw the market of the security tokens. I was in capital markets for years prior to starting the Finhaven company. And, I could see the potential and substantial innovation in capital markets with blockchain infrastructure. And that's how we started, and we pushed forward, and we got the regulatory authorizations with our platform back in 2020. We operated Finhaven private chain. Now we shifted our gear to releasing Finhaven Chain. And the Finhaven Chain essentially it's an alternative investment tokenization market infrastructure for financial institutions. The amazing thing of Finhaven Chain is we have a dual network. One is permission network for financial institutions, and the other one is permissionless network for innovation drivers. And they coexist in a regulation compliant way.
Interesting. Yeah, I've spent, as I told you, quite a bit of time in crypto. I started India's first Bitcoin exchange. Also served as advisor to a couple of security token platforms. So I'm really excited about digging in and asking you a bunch of more technical questions. But DH, why don't you? Actually, you were going to say your grandmother's from India. What's up with that?
Yeah. So I recently published my book, The Simplistic Revolution, and the preface of the book starts with my background. I was born in a small harbor city. Actually, back in those days, it was not a small harbor city. In terms of the importance of the harbor is quite important because it's the center, the main entry point to the continent from many islands around the city. And my last name is Kim, DH Kim, Toyhung Kim. And Kim family, I'm the 72nd generation. So my first grandfather was born in 1842. And I'm the 11th generation since my grandfathers moved to that city. And by the record, they're the first grandmother. So the first grandfather, 1842, his wife was a princess from Ayutthaya Kingdom. And people think that's from Ganges River. There's somewhere around the Ganges River. So I don't know, but that's what anthropologists say. So we'll see.
Cool. So what was 18? What year did you say that was?
It's 1842.
1880.
Oh, no, 80. So 42. So BC AD.
How many years ago?
42. So that's roughly about 2,000 years ago, right? So
1,000.
Yeah. And another thing that is interesting about Korea, we still have that genealogy book.
So I'm confused. It's what year is it right now? It's 2026, right?
2026.
So 2,000 years ago would be 26 AD, after Jesus Christ's death. 2,000 years ago.
42. So I'm just I kind of did it approximately. So.
But you're talking about from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. And here we talk. Now we're connecting. Maybe there's some dots that will be.
That's right. So essentially, what we are trying to do with our innovation is really observing our transaction history, right? Because over a period of time, with the computerized systems and with globalizations, our capital market system has become very complicated. So it was all paper, and then we started utilizing computer systems and digital databases, and that's why we always have to do the reconciliation, not just between these two different ledgers, but between the ledgers of intermediaries, because we have to run these two different ledgers, two different types of ledgers. Now we have more intermediaries to keep the integrity of the capital markets, right? And with that, the transaction cost went up. It's quite complicated. We are quite vulnerable to risks. Do you know that we have the central ledger system for all digital securities?
I know what that is, yeah.
Right, centralized securities. So it's a central securities depository.
Yes.
And central securities depositories, they have servers, they have data centers. What if their data centers are bombed and gone? Then, the digital securities
Tell me they got a backup.
Well, what about the backups if their backups are gone?
Yeah.
So, for example, I know one of the major economies, CSD, has two data centers. They use two data centers. And if they are bombed on those two data centers, their country's digital securities will be completely gone.
That's nuts.
Their assets.
And even saying something like that, I think even a year or two ago would have been like, that'll never happen. But obviously, the world that we live in today, I think thinking adversarially and thinking in terms of protecting your assets might be wise. Hey,
right.
I know I did say I was going to switch gears and maybe go into your story, which I will. But I just my mind's like running, so I got to ask you a question. So I told you I started India's first crypto exchange. So I have nothing against crypto, but if I personally, you pulled back the layers here, you would probably find that I bleed orange, right? Like Bitcoin is what got me into this whole world. Bitcoin is why I started my company. And there's this like obvious kind of knee-jerk reaction for people in Bitcoin to be like, another chain, like here we go again. Like, why any problem you're trying to solve, can it not be solved using the Bitcoin ledger? We have Lightning. Technically, you can insert data on layer 2 and this and that. So, if you can maybe help me help me figure out why you need another chain. Why can't we use something or Ethereum or something that exists out there already?
Well, I think it's really the main reason here, and the main reason that we, try to release Finhaven Chain in this market for this year is that financial institutions between themselves, they need collaboration. And when they need collaboration, they need a secure system between themselves, right? And trying to get rid of any kind of noise around them. Right? So that's the main point. And even with the financial institutions around the world, although it's a permissioned nodes, the number of nodes are substantial. And we can create a lot of collaboration and safe and secure environment and much better productivity between themselves. And in turn, what's more important is that we can help capital flowing into the real productivity. And in my book, I talk about the Davies. So the Davies can be, small and medium financial institutions, small and medium-sized companies, and investors, and even countries. And in this economy, we tend to see only large-sized institutions can grow really. And small and medium-sized corporations tend to, it's very hard for them to find capital to grow. And even emerging economies, it's very hard to find the capital when we see a substantial productivity in those countries. So we got to create a structure. We got to shift the structure of capital markets with our technology transformation to help capital flow into the real productivity.
So sorry, why can't Ethereum be used? Because it doesn't meet the criteria for security and for institutional adoption.
Well, so if you look at the current trend, some of the financial institutions, they issue their tokens on Ethereum chain. But essentially, if you look at the details, what's really happening in the back is they're all confined to their environment.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So we need a public blockchain, not layer 2, but layer 1, but only the collaboration space between the regulated financial institutions. And that, in the future, it doesn't have to be only the financial institutions, or we can extend it to other regulated institutions, although they are not financial institutions. But still, we can have a safe environment where those regulated bodies can transact each other between the permission nodes.
The name is skipping my mind right now, but maybe about 6-7 years ago, there was a big push amongst all the banks to create a chain. Do you remember the name of that one?
There's a couple of efforts that have been
Well,
made.
there was one that was like very big, like it was kind of the biggest. What was the name of that one? Do you remember?
I don't remember the name, but
it's escaping my. But I guess like what has like what there's been attempts to try and build something like this. So what is the iteration? What's the new?
But even Ripple originally started really for banks, right?
Yes, very much so, right? I mean, they to this day, to some extent, they're still saying that, right? And they do have suites of. So again, I'm trying to figure out, like,
but again, in addition, essentially, if you look at the capital market infrastructure, we are going from, in comparison with the telecommunications, we are going from landline system to mobile network. Okay, so it's a completely two different market infrastructure. Okay? You cannot use a mobile phone using your landline infrastructure. You need a mobile network.
I get it. Okay, Corda, R3. That's the one I was thinking about.
That's right. So
that was a private blockchain that the financial institutions were rallying around, but they didn't work. I don't know why. I'm sure you probably know, right? But why didn't they succeed, and what will enable you to essentially fill that void?
Well, what kind of market you are going after is very important. Okay? For us, we're not talking about public equity. We're not talking about US T-bills. Okay? But our focus is in the alternative investment space, where we see the real productivity and the potentially a true transformation with this market infrastructure. Okay? And secondly, you don't just need one, because you need a competition. And there will be a competition between a similar market infrastructures. And then you will see one of them or a couple of them, they will win most of the market.
Got it. Cool, D8. So I mean, again, I don't want to get lost in the weeds. I know most of our listeners, they're more high level. And my favorite thing, and in a follow-up one, we can also go super deep into some of these kind of technical nuances and geek out on it. But I like to, I don't know, just talk a little bit more about the founder and kind of, chart out their hero's arc. So I was reading about your background and fascinating. I was going to say, so you went to one of the top high schools in Seoul, in one of Korea's most competitive schools, right? So what was that environment like, and what kind of student were you?
Well, it was very competitive. And, after we graduated, some of us in the first grade, so we were in the same classmates. We were the classmates in the first. So in Korea, we have middle school 3 years and high school 3 years, and this is a high school. So the first year, I was a German major, and some of my classmates, we gathered together, we talked about our experience, and we found actually most of us went through emotional struggle in the first year of the school. But for me, it was more about military dictatorship. So when I think I was grade 4, there was a very serious political unrest in South Korea, and we had a military dictatorship, and I really wanted to make a change, and I fell in love with the Marxism when I was in middle school. I fell in love with the existentialism when I was in high school. So I think I was just very serious person, when I was a teenager. And what I was thinking about was revolution.
So that's interesting. So you said you were into Marxism, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about blockchains, or when I think about blockchains, when I think about Bitcoin, I think about free markets. I think
Yeah.
about freedom. I don't think about communism. So I'm just curious, how did you go from, being so into Marxism to now building a tool that democratizes finance in the way
Yeah.
that it is? Maybe I'm missing the link there.
Well, I'm not a Marxist. I'm not a communist. But I think all of us, we live in community, and we are healthy when we live in a true community. And true community means, we relatively wealth is well distributed, right? There and people who work hard, they have opportunities. And when there are the people who cannot really do their, rescue themselves, they need help, and the community helps each other. Now, in my book, I talked about the Davids. Basically, the Davids are the ones that we really have to pay attention to in building this community. And
And by the way, you said
yeah,
David's a few times. Are you referring like to David versus Goliath?
David versus
Got
Goliath.
it.
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Continue.
I got to
Continue.
mention that. Sorry about that. So when I talk about the Davids, they are the ones that we are sort of the losing power in these economies wherever we go, right? So how can we empower those small and medium-sized institutions and businesses, right? And how can we utilize this blockchain technology for that, at least in capital market system, or more broadly, at least in financial market system, right? And to build a healthier communities around the world, and that's the kind of sort of there is a bit of a connection. I never thought of that, but listening to you, it seems there might be a little bit of connection from my childhood.
And you're you left Korea for Lewis and Clark in Portland to study international politics. So why international politics and why the US?
Yeah, well, the major was international affairs, but our department was more about political science, so international relations, international law. I just mentioned that when I was a teenager, I was into revolution, but we eventually got the civilian government in the 1990s, and I went to Korea military as a mandatory service, and I was fortunate to have a experience of working for Korean Congress briefly for the national government audit. And while I was doing that, I saw this news article in one of the Korean major newspapers talking about Lewis and Clark International Affairs, specifically for that department. And it was fascinating. So that's how I went to the school. But a funny fact, later on, I found that one of the sons of that, the newspaper's owners was a student at Lewis and Clark as well.
Cool. So you started your career at Merrill Lynch. This is headquarters in New York. What did that first job teach you about how global capital actually moves?
Well, you're a junior when you're at that age, right? So I was at that age, I was a junior, of course, at Merrill Lynch. But it was great that I was working at the global headquarters. For me, the kind of people that I could meet when I was there was more important than kind of work that I learned. I actually realized that the kind of work was not the work that I really wanted to do for my life, but I could see how the power moves around the world. When I was working there, and then particularly, when you sit at the global headquarters of Merrill Lynch, back in those days, you see basically you don't really have to travel. Everybody comes over to be there, right? And it was just it was an amazing experience. But at the same time, I also learned that I was not really seeking money. I'm not a really guy, I want money, so I just need money. I found that that's not me.
banker, mining CEO, cross-border deal maker, policy
Mm,
advisor to the Korean government on
mm.
FDI. So looking back, which of those chapters do you think prepared you most for what Finhaven became?
I think it was really in combination. So, I constantly talked about. I was constantly talking about the productivity with this market infrastructure. We can enhance productivity of the economies with this new market infrastructure. Um, and that's not about money. It's about creating value for everybody, right? So mining, I went into mining and I fell in love with mining. I still love mining industry. And the main reason is that you really truly deliver real value. But there are a lot of folks who are saying like, mining is bad for environments. But let's face the truth. Everything around us is from mining industry. Everything comes from minerals, right? So you cannot deny the fact. So then it's really how you do this business. But I love the fact that we really deliver the true value for the society, right? So it's not about just you flipping money or flipping assets to make more money, but it's how you can create the true value for the economies and for the people. That's all combined together with my experience. How we can do it, and this is the infrastructure. With the accumulation of experience, that we can deliver the true value for the global society.
You've done cross-border M&A, overseas listings. You've done international capital raises in multiple countries. So what did you keep watching break that most people just accepted as normal?
Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, like what kind of cracks did you see in this financial system that started making you scratch your head a little bit and saying,
Right.
okay, mhm.
So one of the direct experience, when I had my Korean company, listed in Canada, of course, these transfer agents between these two countries that never worked together. So there were multiple steps that we had to take to build that new workflow at the beginning, right? Um, and, and since I was a mining executive, uh, I still get a lot of deal flows from developing economies like Indonesia, Mongolia, Africa, and when I get them, there are a couple of challenges. Uh, a lot of them, there is no proper due diligence on the asset or on the project. And so I have to hire someone to do due diligence, or I have to do the due diligence myself. But conducting due diligence on an asset in foreign countries is very expensive process and work. And so, Sunny, are you there? You're frozen.
Oh, are you frozen?
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah,
Okay.
and so if you can have this system, the infrastructure where the financial institutions can collaborate between these two countries or multiple countries, then now you have a certain regulated entities can do can conduct a proper due diligence for the investors in other countries, right? So the cost can go down substantially. And then let's say you make an investment in a certain country that you don't know well. Now, there's lots of uncertainties and it's a very expensive process. Of course, if you're a large institution, it doesn't matter. There's economy of scale. So you are willing to conduct due diligence. You're willing to move your money to there. But if you're not a large investor, this is the cost that just don't make sense for your investment. And therefore, the other way, the projects in those countries, unless they are huge projects or hugely lucrative and fancy projects, they cannot attract the money from outside. Right? So
Got it.
that's the kind of, I think that's an everyday deal flow that I see.
And when did blockchain first land on your radar?
It was back in 2015. So I went private with my company. It was a public company in Canada, but I went private with it. And then I had a bit of time. So I started doing my research, like all the investment banker habit started coming up again. So I was doing my research to find an industry to invest in. And then I thought, blockchain is a premature technology trend, but essentially the pathway is set. So I started investing in blockchain startups since 2016, and by learning more from them, I realized that the blockchain can be a great capital market infrastructure.
A lot of finance people dismissed blockchain as a casino. What convinced you that this was infrastructure and not just speculation?
Well, that's actually a very good question, because the continuous struggle in my conversation with people is that blockchain is deemed synonymous with cryptocurrencies, right? But blockchain it's a backend technology. It's a ledger technology. It's cryptocurrencies. So the infrastructure and the financial products are two different things.
Okay, so from day one, you've said Finhaven is not a crypto company, right? It's a capital markets infrastructure company. Why was that distinction worth planting a flag on?
Well, back then, the ICO was very hot. So if you are a blockchain company, basically you are a company who's going to issue cryptocurrency and raise money, and one day you'll be gone, right? So but our identity was really building that infrastructure and working with the regulators to properly establish market infrastructure for a certain economy. Since we're in Korea, that was for the Canadian markets. And after we started it, we gained more customers from outside Canada, and we're expanding now to other countries.
You sat on the BC Securities Commission's FinTech Advisory Committee in the founding cohort, and you served a second term. So what did you learn about how regulators really think about this tech?
I think regulators, at least at the BC Securities Commissions, they were quite open. The reason they started this FinTech Advisory Board was to really learn from the industry, right? So learn from the industry how it really works and how the policies gotta be changed or formulated newly to accommodate the innovations that new technologies can bring.
And in 2020, Finhaven became the first platform in Canada, right, authorized as an STO dealer, marketplace, and a clearing agency under one roof. So what had to change inside, regulators and inside you to get there?
Wow, that was actually a huge experience, and requires a long conversation. Uh, for example, here we're authorized as a clearing agency. It's, of course, there's no clearing process here, right? There's no clearance because there's atomic settlement. But then, legally, if you do the settlement, you got to be a clearing agency. That's why we got the exemption for that. Right? So it was a regulatory sandbox with the multiple exemptions and restrictions. So a great thing is we showed and also kind of opened the possibilities for the Canadian markets as a pioneer, and I think it was great. It was lots of expensive experience, but I think we did the right thing. In terms of building the market with those restrictions and exemptions was quite tough, because blockchain, as I emphasized multiple times, is really the playground for collaboration between institutions and investors and issuers as well. But then within this regulatory sandbox environment, we're alone with the issuers and investors, right? So then what is the real difference from traditional finance? Really not much. So there was a real challenge to build real business that we wanted to build, with the restrictions and exemptions that we received. Although it was a great blessing to be able to be a pioneer for the market.
So walk us through Finhaven today. If I'm an issuer raising capital or an investor on the other side, what does my experience look like on your platform?
So this year we stopped doing that traditional ones, right? The past. That's the past. Now, what we are doing right now is to really serve other financial institutions with blockchain. Okay, so we don't help companies to raise money right now. We used to do that up until last year, but from this year we're completely focused on releasing public blockchain, Finhaven Chain, for financial institutions and for innovators.
Finhaven Chain launches in 2026. What's the vision and why a public blockchain specifically? If you can maybe go a bit deeper into that.
Yeah. So you need to have an open system, but then you cannot allow non-regulated entities to be the validators in capital markets. And at the same time, network effect, essentially, it's the true effect from collaboration comes from the public blockchain. Okay? So public blockchain with permission system, but permissioned with how many institutions? We're talking about tens of thousands of institutions coming together for collaboration. And essentially that is almost permissionless network effect. But at the same time, we have permissionless network in parallel, and we built, and there's a bridge between them, so that the innovators in the capital markets, for example, AI innovators for financial markets, they can be in the other network, and the new innovations can be transferred into the permission network as well. So we kind of designed a parallel system for it.
And you still chair the NMC resource. So critical minerals, copper, nickel, lithium, rare earths, right? These are suddenly the biggest geopolitical story of the decade. Where does Canada fit, and where does tokenization fit?
Well, Canada is extremely important because we are quite wealthy with our resources, but we're still unexplored, undeveloped. And there is a great potential in terms of energy and minerals for the world economy. And we are a trusted country by a lot of countries around the world, and we can play a substantial role with natural resources we got in this country. And let's think about stablecoin. I think Canadian dollar stablecoin can become really important. We have a few players in the market. In fact, Finhaven is also considering issuing Canadian stablecoin. And the stablecoin essentially, you need a strong economy to have a strong stablecoin of your country, right? And that the natural resources that we have is the backbone and the true underlying value for the stablecoins that we're going to issue in this country.
Your first 2026 book, the Simplicity Revolution, is about blockchain, capital, and return to structural clarity. What's the core argument you're making?
The complexity has been deemed as sophistication. Okay? So if you look at these financial markets, there are so many institutions. It's so complex. So only those folks who can understand, who has experience within the system, can play a role there. But transaction is supposed to be very simple, right? We know how our grandfathers and grandmothers, sold their land. Right? You have elders in the village, and when you tell everybody that I give 2 pieces of silver to John, and John's land behind his home, that's my land from today. And everybody reckons, okay, that's your land. Now, the marketplaces in our history were the areas where those transactions were recognized as fact and truth at the spot. But over a period of time, it became very complicated between paper and digital and then institutions. With blockchain, we can simplify it again, and we can mitigate the risks in the market. And we don't stop there. Actually, we can create true network effect so that small and medium companies and institutions can collaborate each other and create the true value for the society.
Cool. Well, DH, this brings us to the end of our interview. I'm not going to lie, I had a whole bunch more questions queued up. Maybe we can do a part 2 if your busy schedule permits in the future. But maybe just help me land the plane. Tell people where they can learn more about Finhaven, where they can learn more about you. Are you on LinkedIn mostly, or where do you share your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn. I have a Substack. I try to write more frequently. Finhaven.com is our website. We have to actually improve our website. One thing that we have been bad is our marketing. and I try to do much better with our marketing from now on. So you're going to probably see better websites in the coming days. And at the same time, please follow on LinkedIn and the Substack and send me messages if you have any questions.
Awesome. I see we have quite a few people listening to us right now. So thank you all for tuning in. And thank you, DH, for an amazing interview. I really appreciate your time. Just hang out for 1 minute, DH. I'm going to bring this stream to an end. Until next time, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, Sunny.